Welcome to the top 25 best episodes of Trek. We only have 2 more blocks of episodes to talk about after this. Today, though, we have a bunch of courtroom Trek episodes and general plots getting at deep truths. Thanks for joining me. I'm your host, Dustin Wing. Crossing over at 24 and 25, ploy to start a war. Or Unification Parts 1 and 2. As the episode opens by paying tribute to Gene Roddenberry, so shall we here. The show had already become Berman Trek several seasons before, and Roddenberry's health had been failing for some time. There's something kind of perfect that it's tied to the episode where one of Trek's oldest characters in Sarek also goes to see the Great Koala. But not before an amazing scene between he and Picard, trying to figure out why Spock went to Romulus. These episodes provide us with some of the deepest looks at Romulan society ever, as Picard and Data go undercover in a cloaked Klingon ship to find Spock. While Trek crossovers have become a fairly common part of new Trek, this was the first episode in the franchise to focus on a character from the previous series for more than one scene. While Picard, Data, and Spock outwit not Tasha Yar, the Enterprise under Riker goes on an interesting side quest to figure out what happened to a missing Vulcan ship. The two plots meet as it's discovered the Romulans stole Vulcan ships to attempt a takeover of the planet Vulcan with a forced reunification. In the end, when their plot is revealed to the Quadrant by Spock, we learn how committed the Romulans are to principles when they destroy their own invasion fleet rather than let them be captured by the Federation. These are very engaging episodes that were nominated for an Emmy in Art Direction. I hope we come back to where Seela's at in a future episode of Trek. Only finding the truth you're interested in at 23, Kangaroo Court. Or The Drumhead. This episode is quite straightforward, but its cautionary tale is a high point in courtroom Trek. When a Klingon exchange officer is found to be passing Federation secrets to the Romulans, and coincidentally the warp core of the D has a little oopsie, the two things are assumed to have the same root cause. What we find, though, is that coincidence and causality are not always the same thing, and making conclusions made before an investigation can lead to a witch hunt pretty quickly. A crew member that has nothing to do with the plot to steal documents gets caught up in the investigation and has his Starfleet career ruined because he lied about his grandfather being Romulan to get into the service. And just when this admiral, desperately trying to stay relevant, looks like she's going to break the man that neither the Borg nor Five Lights could, Picard, using the words of Admiral Satie's father in the end, and letting her show her worst self to all for the purpose of shutting down these sham hearings, is possibly Picard's best monologue in all of Trek. The scenes between he and Worf also help drive the moral point home. I wish our world as a whole would watch and learn something from this, because in the 30 years since this one debuted, people seem to make conclusions they then build a worldview on way too often. Finding out what evil really is at 22, True Nature. Or Waltz. Sometimes you can just cram 2 actors into a broom closet and get a masterful performance, as long as it's 2 actors that have great chemistry. And Avery Brooks and Mark Alamo in a cave for the bulk of an episode really works as one of Trek's top plots. As Dukat is being taken to stand trial for war crimes, the Dominion attacks the USS Honshu, and he and the Cisco take a shuttle and end up in a cave on a desolate planet, where a not mentally stable Dukat plays games with Ben pretty much to placate his own ego. Up to this point in DS9, you might actually believe Dukat is the good guy that's just been misunderstood. But as the episode plays out, Dukat just unravels, seeing visions of Weyoun, Damar, and Kira that rile him up, and lay bare his true nature as the Cisco forces him to confront the truth of his life, and why he has no statue on Bajor. The only rather puzzling thing at the end, Dukat leaves Ben to rot on this inhospitable planet, but then lets the Defiant know where to find him. I suppose it's just part of the Prophet's grand plan. Considering how many cave episodes there are in Trek, this is easily the best showing of that setting. Putting history straight at 21, alternative facts. Or living witness. This episode is proof positive that the winner of a conflict writes the history of it. Between information lost over centuries and just plain misinformation injected into the narrative, this one makes me wonder how much of our own history bears literal resemblance to the reality of the situation. This is the only episode of Trek to not feature a real human being at all, and the first 20 minutes are the closest Voyager got to having a Mirror Universe episode. We see an evil and overly dramatized version of the Voyager crew committing war crimes for siding with one alien species over another. But 700 years have gone by, and the Doctor apparently had a backup module stolen during the battle, and after being reactivated, attempts to set the record straight. People don't like it when you stir up old feelings, especially when they think it's settled history. By simply correcting this planet's view of history, it starts a race riot, but as we see 700 more years go by, it sets the stage for a true peace between these two species, with millenniums of distrust between them. A very different formula for Trek that gives us some practical looks at historical accounts that may not be what we think they are. Coming back to the same moment at number 20, Cyclical Shenanigans. Or magic to make the sanest man go mad. Yes, I see the dislikes every time I put a Discovery episode amongst Trek's best, and honestly, I don't care, this is hands down Discovery's best. When this episode first came out, I remember thinking, wow, Disco's finally hit its stride only 7 episodes into its run. I'm a little miffed that after 4 seasons and counting, nothing has even come as close to the top as this episode had. Hashtag bring back Brian Fuller. This takes the classic time loop trope, makes it really interesting, adds one of Trek's oldest antagonists, Harry Mudd, and manages to give main characters some amazing growth through a purely fun episode of Trek. 2 things that really shouldn't work in a montage and killing of a Starfleet captain, when put together, become one of the funniest things, as Mudd unalives Lorca over and over in very casual yet deadly ways. It's somehow satisfying watching Discovery blow up over and over, but even more satisfying to tie in the history of Mr. Mudd and having it be the supposed love of his life, Stella, being the thing that ultimately stops him in the end. For those that don't like Discovery, if you don't like this one, I don't think you even like television. Laughing all the way at 19, Furry Scallops. Or The Trouble with Tribbles. Welcome to not only TOS's best episode, but Trek's best comedy. Start to finish, every scene is hilarious, while telling a serious story that furthers the Federation's Cold War with the Klingons. This is the first TOS episode I actually remember watching as a kid. Not necessarily that it was the first episode I saw, but after watching TNG, most of the plots of the original series are just forgettable. Not this one with its cute little critters that make soothing sounds. The actors, particularly William Shatner, have a more casual demeanor than other episodes, and it really helps sell the silliness as the Tribbles overpopulate both the Enterprise and Station K7. My only problem with the episode is Bones, a medical doctor that doesn't know the difference between bisexual and asexual. But given how good the rest is, we'll just call it a brain fart on the part of McCoy. This episode was so nice it had to be done twice, with DS9 going back and Forrest Gumping themselves into the fun, while desperately trying to not get a visit from temporal shenanigan investigations. The episode was nominated for a Hugo Award, and while not winning, I will bestow my own award of Best Episode of TOS. Fighting for Equal Rights at number 18, If I Only Had a Soul. Or The Measure of a Man. Considering the first 2 seasons of TNG are generally some of the worst seasons across all of Trek, the second season does have 2 standout episodes, with this being one of them. The episode starts with our first look at the often recurring game of poker, and it's Data's first game ever. It humanizes him, as does the contrast to Bruce Maddox trying to take Data under his command while acting more artificial than an android by ignoring normal pleasantries like just entering Data's quarters and always calling him it. This is probably the first time we see Picard as more human than a block of wood, as he's reintroduced to Captain Lavoie, who prosecuted his court-martial after the loss of the Stargazer. You get the sense that they might have had a romantic thing before she came at him hard after the loss of his ship. It's also his first epic speech as he defends Data's rights of personhood, especially after Guinan gives probably her best bit of dialogue, using her usual reverse psychology to get Picard to see that this could lead to a slave army. A prophecy we see come true in Picard at Utopia Planitia. In the end, Data is granted personhood, though the ruling doesn't extend to other artificial life, setting up the Doctor to carry that torch in the future. This is easily Trek's best courtroom episode, and probably the best character development for much of the main cast early on in TNG. Inserting yourself into history at 16 and 17, Trump's second term, or past tense parts 1 and 2. After some really fun episodes in this block, this is one of Trek's darkest yet most poignant episodes that speaks to us today. I've avoided talking about anything political in these rankings, but there's too many current real-world analogies in this plot to not. Many episodes don't age well, but this one's message has gotten more important as time has gone on. When the episode was written in the rosy, carefree 90s, this appeared to be the way the writers were diverging the Trek universe from our own, showing one of Earth's darkest moments. However, much of what's here hits closer to home than many of us want. As this review premieres, we're less than a year away from where time shenanigans drop Sisko, Bashir, and Dax through some of the most technobabble O'Brien ever has to explain. We get to see the hard differences in a caste system where the pretty lady Jadzia gets help when she has no ID, but Sisko and Bashir are being thrown into the Gaza Strip simply for existing. Through Jadzia rubbing elbows with high society, we learn that Europe is falling apart, which sounds ominously familiar. Meanwhile, Ben and Julian are crammed into what amounts to a debtor's prison, which brings up some of Trek's toughest questions about how things could get like this, and if it could happen again, which is a little foreshadowing to the ethical compromises that will be made in the upcoming Dominion War. Ben gets to become part of history as he takes on the role of Gabriel Bell, a man that famously saved the lives of hostages, and by the end you realize this has all been self-fulfilling time shenanigans. In our reality, there's still time to put right what once went wrong in Trek, but that time is running out.
Ah, computer! That program is available.
Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major. Thanks, Major.
Last time on Star Trek The Next Generation.
Thanks, Major.
Linkage complete.
Thanks, Major.
Working.
Thanks, Major.
Riker William T. Identified.
Thanks, Major.
And now the conclusion.